You're listening to Twins Takes, the Minnesota Twins podcast.
Play ball!
And welcome into Twins Takes. I'm Twins Central, joined here this afternoon by Twins Insider as the Twins are coming off a series-salvaging Sunday victory over Milwaukee. Royce Lewis still struggling. Simeon Woodruffson officially sent to the bullpen. All that and more coming up on this episode. Twins Insider, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Central, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's always good to win a game. If they're going to lose a series 1-2, I'd prefer them to win the game the day that we're recording because I think it puts us in a little bit better mood.
I agree. And, given our recent history with Milwaukee, it ultimately 1-2 is, I think, something we'll all take.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we all expected. I believe Provis said on the broadcast today that the Brewers had won 7 straight at Target Field heading into today, so it's good for the Twins to get that monkey off their back. But now we'll get into the news.
Breaking news.
Well, I got some bad news for you.
Extra.
Good news, everyone.
It's time for the news.
As mentioned, the Twins dropped the series against Milwaukee 1-2. They lost 1-run games on Friday and Saturday and then came back this afternoon, won a 1-run game behind a solid Bailey Oberstart. Not his best, certainly not as good as last time out, but he went 5 innings, only allowed 3 runs, and the bullpen did the job. I thought Garcia was maybe going to give it away at the end. We'll get into that a little bit later. What an odd decision to have Luis Garcia as your closer.
Yeah, this makes about 3 weeks now where I think a lot of us have mentally had him as maybe the next guy in the DFA block, and then he keeps pitching in the 8th and 9th inning of tie games, 1-run leads. So I know he throws hard. I don't really know what anybody sees in him. I'm not sure what Shelton sees in him. It's seemingly working. There's that.
Yeah, I guess it's working. He has 2 strikeouts in 8 2/3 innings, so it's certainly not reliable. He's 38, 39 years old. I'd prefer they just get rid of him and call up a guy like John Klein, even if that guy is even a little bit worse than Luis Garcia. I'd rather have those innings invested in a guy that maybe has somewhat of a future here, but he did get the job done today. He now is the second Twin, along with Justin Topa, to have multiple saves. They both have 2, and then there's a handful of guys with 1. Taj Bradley, a guy the Twins could use for reinforcement with Simeon Woodruffson officially moving to the bullpen that we'll talk about in a little bit. He went on a rehab start Sunday afternoon. A weird line for him, just an inning and 2/3, allowed 1 run, 2 hits, walked 2, struck out 3. He only threw 42 pitches. I was listening to Derek Shelton in the postgame. They asked him about that. Shelton said that he had a 35-pitch inning, so they took him out. They didn't want to tax him on a rehab assignment, but everything checked out fine. He went to the bullpen after the game and got up to either 65 or 70 pitches. Shelton wasn't quite sure, but I would assume that we see Taj Bradley here next weekend. I believe it's in Boston.
Yeah, I believe that his first day able to come off the IL will be, I think, this Friday or this Saturday, one of those two, and we'll probably see him right about then in Boston. Like you said, he seems like he's basically built up. You shouldn't have lost your conditioning in a matter of a week. So that'll be a lot, much needed reinforcement. Maybe don't have him throw 118 pitches every start like they've been doing, but I think the Twins kind of lucked out with him having a pec injury and seemingly only missing 2 weeks.
Yeah, and it is the second time in his career that he has dealt with this sort of injury. While it's not as bad as a shoulder or an arm, it's not exactly ideal for a starting pitcher. On the bullpen side of things, Cody Lawyerson, who got off to a really good start with the Twins, he also began a rehab assignment. He pitched Saturday night, went an inning, walked 1, but didn't allow any runs. So he's a guy that they'll probably get 1 or 2 more appearances. And then if they want to get him up for, say, a Luis Garcia type, they certainly can do that. He pitched well enough while he was healthy with the Twins that I think he deserves to get another crack at it.
I think he definitely does. But right before he got hurt, he had actually earned himself like the 8th or 9th inning role. But before he's back, we're gonna have to figure out As we've talked about like a week ago, Matt Bowman and John Brebbia both have those opt-outs today, the 17th. They've both exercised them. The team has 48 hours to respond. I'm going to put you a little on the spot here and ask, do you actually want to see either of them? I know that Bowman was good in AAA, but he does have like a career 5 ERA. Brebbia wasn't even very impressive in AAA. I think Lawyerson's better than both of them, but do you want to see one of these veterans?
Yeah, I certainly don't want to see Brebbia. You mentioned he struggled for the Saints. I'm looking here. He had a 6.20 ERA in 20 and a third innings. That's not going to get him called up. Bowman, I would be somewhat interested in. He struck out 25 and 21 and a third innings, only walked 6 hitters. The ERA 1.69, very nice. So I would be interested in seeing Bowman. We saw him here a few years ago. He is productive. He's kind of a quad A, bullpen arm that you're fine pitching him in the 5th or 6th inning. I certainly would rather see him than Luis Garcia. But I think, like you said, Lawyerson's certainly higher up. And the fact of the matter is, if they wanted to see either of these guys, they would have been up here by now. I wouldn't expect this opt-out to have too much, to change their plans.
No, I agree with that. And for that matter, I think Bowman will probably get signed with somebody else, and he'll pitch in the MLB and he'll pitch a couple mop-up innings, then get DFA'd and do that a couple times. I don't even know if Brebbia, he's a little older. He might just be, frankly, sort of done.
Yeah, and this is a situation that the Twins have 48 hours after these guys opt out, so they have until Wednesday to decide to either put them on the roster or let them be released and find another team. If they do decide to try to find another team, which they obviously will, assuming they aren't called up, and they fail to find that team, they always can re-sign with the Twins on a minor league deal. So say Brebbia opts out, nobody's interested in his services, the Twins can always bring him back if both parties are interested in that. I would think Bowman, like you said, probably gets signed to another team and maybe a similar type of contract where he has a month to opt out or make the team. But we'll keep an eye on both of those, get an update on them. Next episode, now into our main topics. No secret what we're going to talk about this week. Royce Lewis just really, really going through it. Had a crucial error in yesterday's ball game to give the Brewers what turned into be the game-winning run. And then this afternoon, 0 for 3 strikeouts before being pulled for Trevor Larnach pinch hit appearance. And it wasn't even with guys on base or anything. It was a pretty low leverage spot. I mean, the game was 5-3 at the time, so a home run would have given you a little bit more breathing room, but it's not like they pinch hit for him, in a big spot with a bunch of guys on base.
Yeah, let me just briefly read this quote. It's now it's a couple years old, but I told hitting coach David Popkins today, hey, I don't do that slump thing. That's not a real thing for me. Well, that quote of all, baseball quotes is going to go down in infamy because he's been in a slump for 2 years. He's hitting 163 with a 540 OPS. He's got hitting 138 in his last 18 games, 22 strikeouts in those 65 at-bats, only 2 extra base hits. This reminds me of Matt Wallner at this point, where he was hitting 167 with a 551 OPS. Those are actually better than what Royce is doing. So you have that option in the back pocket. You have that one more chance to try to reset him in AAA. But I think you have to pull the plug. It's just like with Wallner at this point, you're not helping him figure it out at this level. You're probably hurting him.
Yeah, well, his quote might have actually been correct. Like you said, it's been a slump of 2 years. I'd argue at this point, it's not a slump. He's just not a Major League Baseball player at this point in time. When you've been bad for over 2 years, it's hard for me to say that it's a slump. And I think we just all need to readjust our expectations, kind of like what we had to do with Bailey Ober's velocity heading into this year. This is just who he is now. As unfortunate as it is, we'll always have those moments in the 2023 playoffs. Those home runs aren't going to go away. But sadly for Twins fans, for the Twins, and just for Royce Lewis, he appears to not be a good baseball player. The thing with Wallner, they didn't even have like a real option to call up. They called up Ryan Kreidler, who's fine, but he's a role player. He's, 30 years old or whatever. The Twins do have a role player at AAA. They could call up Orlando Arcia, who's just absolutely mashing the ball. But the more exciting option they have at AAA, they could easily swap in top prospect Kalen Culpepper, who's not off to an amazing start, but he has a WRC plus of 106 with the Saints. This is the first time he's been with the Saints, I believe, at least to start the season. So he's holding his head above water. I'm curious what they would do, assuming they do move on from Royce Lewis. So I guess I have 2 questions for you. do you think they will move on from Royce Lewis? If not, before this Astros series, if he's pretty awful here for the next week or so, do you think they'll move on from him? And then if they do you think they'll opt to go with an Orlando Arcia type, or do you think they'll crack Kalen Culpepper's glass and get him up here?
I have a sneaking feeling. First of all, I think they'll almost certainly option Royce, if not by the Astros series after that. I sort of have a feeling it's going to be Arcia. You can talk yourself into the Arcia Gray platoon at third base is like two, perfectly fine, mediocre MLB players. Culpepper's obviously an exciting one. Culpepper also has 9 steals in his 39 games in St. Paul, which Lewis was running early in the year, but with his injuries, he hasn't been able to run. I know the Twins have actually a lot of steals, but that would be another thing you could lean into with Culpepper. I really want his athleticism. He's made a lot of athletic plays. They've had him play short and second and third, kind of in preparation for this. I don't know if he's quite ready, but if he comes up and is overmatched, you could send him back down and then call up Arcia or call Royce up. So I think it's time. I don't know if they will do that, but that's what I would do.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you that I expect Royce Lewis to not be on the roster tomorrow. Who that's for, I think also it'll be Arcia, just because I've got the sense that they want to slow play Kalen Culpepper a little bit. They talk coming out of spring training, they're not going to rush him up here. He's only had, a month and a half here of games at AAA, and while he's been okay, he hasn't been bashing the door down. And then the other thing you mentioned, Tristan Gray, he hasn't exactly been great either. He had that great start where he had, 8 RBIs in one game or something like that. His OPS down to 657 over the last 28 games. Keep in mind, he's not playing every day, but he has a 501 OPS in that stretch over the last 2 weeks, just a 205 OPS, hitting .071. So he's really struggled. I wouldn't be that excited to see him. I'd actually just play RC every day and see if he can, carry over the hot bat from AAA. And they could also, bring up an outfielder like Kyler Fedko if they wanted to get rid of Royce Lewis, and they could do the platoon of Tristan Gray and Brian Kreidler at third base if they wanted to have an outfielder on the roster instead of Arcia or Culpepper.
They could do that. Yet again, if this is where Emmanuel Rodriguez not like jamming his thumb into first base would be really helpful. You'd call him up. He'd play a lot of outfield. He'd play some center with Buck banged up. He'd play some right. And then he'd, you do that Kreidler and Gray platoon, like you said. The one thing I will say about Tristan Gray, he does have 2 outs above average. And Arcia is a solid fielder as well. That's what those two bring. When I talk about like MLB players, they bring that stability, because the bad hitting is one thing, but watching Royce Lewis screw up like a T-ball level ground out to basically lose a game, that's the thing that I think really drives managers crazy. Because again, the hitting, it comes and goes maybe, but the fielding, the routine fielding plays that he screwed up this year, that's just unprofessional. So that would be another sort of feather in the Arcia Kreidler Gray cap.
Yeah, and Royce Lewis does have -2 OAA on the year, all at third base. That's a 12th percentile of all players. He did make a nice barehanded play this afternoon, so he does make some plays where you're like, wow, that's really great, and then, he screws up the ball that's hit right at him yesterday. Kreidler, if they were to play him at third base, he'd be exceptional there. He's not going to hit enough to be a third baseman, but he's a legit shortstop center fielder. So if you're strictly going defense, that's where you'd go with him. Speaking of potentially needing an outfielder, Byron Buxton hasn't played in 4 days. I believe it's a hip issue that's holding him out. They're kind of slow playing it. At this point, they could place him on the IL, and he'd only have to be out another 6 days if they chose to backdate it. I didn't hear anything in the post game. They mentioned on the broadcast they were going to make a decision after today. How concerned are you about this injury?
In a vacuum, I wouldn't be particularly concerned. He would either be back very soon or, be back in a week, but he has had this injury a couple of times in 22 and 24. It's flared up, and it's led to like a month on the IL. That's the only concern I have. It's just that he's had this before a couple of times. Buxton has had it's hard with him with his injuries because they always seemingly don't seem like they're a big deal, and then they oftentimes lead to an injured list stint that's not minimal. Until I actually see him on the injured list, I'm going to assume he'll be back soon. But obviously, he's the team's best player. If he plays this series, they honestly probably sweep. Their offense was missing his, big thump, his dramatic extra base hits. So he's their best player. I certainly hope he's back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we saw how much the lineup missed him, like you mentioned, this series. He's on such a heater right now. We went over his stats over the last 162 games. Last episode, he had 50 home runs in that stretch of 162 games. They really missed him here. We saw Kreidler start twice, and then I'm not sure who started in center field yesterday. I didn't get a chance to watch that one. Actually, I was busy with graduation, but I was following along. And then tomorrow, we've kind of hinted at this. We thought it was coming. Declan Goff of Score North has been strongly hinting at it. Kendry Rojas will be getting the ball in Simeon Woods Richardson's spot. He's due up to start tomorrow, but he will not be getting the ball to start. It will be Kendry Rojas. We've seen him simply as a reliever thus far, but he's been a starter in the minors. He was a starter when the Twins acquired him. We've seen him go multiple innings, seemingly a piggyback, or maybe they both go one time through the order here, but SWR officially to the bullpen.
Yeah, Declan does a great job. Like you said, he's sort of been dropping these breadcrumbs since his last complete meltdown start. It's not something you want to see, but I think we've talked about a lot for several episodes now. It's time. It's like the Royce move. It's like the Wallner move. A change is needed. There's no option him. He's out of options. So, I'm sort of curious how this plays out. Like, is he going to be kind of a bulk guy who will pitch basically on his starter schedule, pitch, one time through the order every 5 days? Is he going to play? Are they going to have him go an inning or two, have that velo play up? What would that look like? Would it make him more effective? I think they're going to kind of try some different things. They might also basically try a stint where he doesn't throw in a real game for like a week and a half, and he just, screws around in the bullpen. And again, he's a talented player. He's been solid in the past. I don't know what the future looks like, but this team certainly could use some kind of breakthrough in the bullpen, whether it was a short inning guy or a bulk guy.
Yeah, I really simply have no interest in seeing him just like work this 4-day plan that they've got done with the Kendry Rojas's, the John Kleins. We've already seen that. That's basically just a starter, but instead of starting in the first inning, you're starting in the third or fourth inning. We've seen he's not effective in that role. It's time to try something else. He's 25, 26 years old. He's out of options at this point, as we've mentioned countless times. The door on him starting, he could come back and start this year, after the trade deadline, but the odds of him being in your rotation in 2027 and beyond are just extremely thin. I think it's time to figure out what he can do. They did it with Andrew Morris with mixed results. I'd like to see them do that with SWR. We'll see what they do the first time tomorrow. With Rojas starting, you'll probably get 60 pitches out of him, which with his lack of control, that's probably only going to get you 3 innings or so. Then I think you probably give Sim a time and a half through the order. So you get those two guys through the 5th or 6th inning, and then you kind of just treat it as a normal game at that point. But I'm interested to see how they do this over the next few weeks, because I think it'll be very telling.
Well, and of course it's kind of on Sim. If he struggles in that like 2 or 3 inning role, then they'll probably desperately try short inning, 25 pitches, max effort. And then if he struggled at that, they would probably have to just get rid of him. If he's, is good in that max effort role, maybe he all of a sudden becomes like your setup guy. I really, it's a pivotal point for him, and it's kind of completely in his hands.
Yeah, and I've seen plenty of people that are skeptical of Sim as a reliever, which I totally understand. He doesn't have overpowering stuff as a starter, but there has been instances where we've seen him get up to 94, 95 miles per hour, just one-off pitches throughout the game. If you say, you're going to get 30 pitches here max, we need you to get 1 or 2 innings worth. If he can be at that, 95, 96 mark, there's no reason he can't be at least a solid reliever. So the people that are already writing him off, I think that's a little bit premature, but the only way to know is by trying it. And I do hope that's what they decide to do, that they don't just say, instead of starting every 5th day, we're going to use you as a long man every 4th day. That's not really learning anything new. In other topics from this series, James Outman started all 3 games. He's seemingly in line for more playing time, with Wallner being optioned. Trevor Larnach, it is worth noting, was dealing with a little bit of an injury. He did pinch hit today, as I mentioned, so that could be part of the reason we saw Outman get all that playing time. He did rip a triple last night. I thought it was going to end up being the game-tying play, but then he made a stupid base running mistake, didn't tag on a shallow fly ball where the left fielder slid, and certainly would have had to make a hell of a play to throw him out. So the good, bad, and the ugly with James Outman, but I guess we're going to see more of it here over the next few weeks.
he, comparing him to Wallner, who he's kind of playing for, he's certainly more athletic. He's certainly, with his kind of new swing, he's actually more contact oriented than Wallner, but he's not a good player. He's a bench player. I do wonder if he plays more, if that power that he has will show up. Even when he was bad last year, you saw the power. He had that big power season early in his career. Because that, for a bench bat who's kind of overexposed, that you kind of just want him to hit a random home run every so often, which he has none still. But like I said, he's ultimately a fine bench player. If Buxton's going to be out and he has to play every day, that's a problem.
Yeah, I certainly don't want him playing every day, but maybe he gets one start a series, and if while Buxton's out, maybe he gets even more than that, as we saw this weekend against Milwaukee. He does run the base as well. That does require you to get on base if you're not being used as a pinch hitter, which has been the main problem for him. Speaking of not allowing guys on base, Connor Prielipp continues to just shine for the Twins. 6 innings pitched on Saturday afternoon, allowed 2 runs, 1 earned, did allow a homer, walked 2, struck out 8. Just another brilliant start for the Twins lefty. At this point, like on Twitter, I don't even see people getting that excited for him. Like, this is just what we expect out of Prielipp.
Yeah, he is just an incredibly talented baseball player. It's always with him only been the health. My understanding, even when he was drafted, was that without injury and without COVID kind of wrecking his, I think it would be sophomore year, that he may have been the first overall pick in the 2021 MLB draft. I think that was. He, like I said, he's just incredibly talented. He's been getting the Chris Sale comp since he was a high schooler, I think. I mean, this is what he's done everywhere. So it's fun to see it. I certainly hope he stays healthy. And, it's fun to watch a young starter develop, to watch him get more efficient at his pitch count, to watch him start to get deeper in the game. Be nice if the team would score for him and give him a win, but you can't ask for much more from him. He's kind of saved them with some of the injuries they've had.
Yeah, and we've already seen the team starting to manage his workload. He was pushed back this weekend. He was due up to start, I believe, Thursday. He didn't start till Saturday. He's thrown between AAA and St. Paul this year, 37 and 2/3 innings. The most he's pitched prior to this season was 2025, where he pitched 82 and 2/3. So he's nearly halfway there, and we're only, a quarter of the way through the season. So come late August, early September, he's probably in line to be shut down once he reaches the 120, 130 inning mark, if he even gets that high. But while he is pitching right now, it's just really fun to watch. Hopefully he can keep it up. Hopefully he doesn't run into a fatigue wall at some point. Another guy that's heating up, Cody Clemens. He's been really, really good. Another good game this afternoon. More lefty on lefty crime. He has a OPS over 1,000 versus left-handed pitchers. He had a little league home run this afternoon where he hit the double off the wall, and then the third base or shortstop threw it into the dugout, allowing him to reach home. He has an 838 OPS in the last 22 games. That's roughly over the last month of the season. So why Josh Bell and Victor Caratini have continued to struggle at first base / DH, Clemens is doing his job and much more.
Yeah, he's getting closer to being the best in his family to ever play in the big leagues. But he's going to have a lot more hot weeks to catch his famous family member. But it's certainly good for him. He's also, I think we should mention, he's first in baseball in defensive runs saved at first base. He very well may be the third Twin in a row to win a Gold Glove at first base. So for a guy who you acquired for cash considerations last year, just kind of off the waiver wire, he's been an incredible player for this team. He's turned into a middle of the lineup bat who's a good fielder and who makes no money. You really can't ask for much more.
Yeah, we'll see how long, he can keep that job at first base held down. This is, I thought coming into the offseason, I was fine with them just giving the job to Cody Clemens. They obviously opted to sign Josh Bell, who's primarily played much more DH than first base, which if I knew that was going to be the case, I certainly wouldn't have signed Josh Bell at all. I think that money could have been reinvested elsewhere much better, as we've talked about before on this podcast. But people kind of write him off. They forget about him. And then you look up, nearly 2 months into the season, and he's one of the best hitters in the lineup. His overall OPS is still in the 700s, I believe, just because he got off to a pretty bad start. And they were facing so many lefties to start the year. But a really encouraging last few weeks for Cody Clemens for a lineup that desperately needs it. Now we'll wrap up our thoughts on this Milwaukee series with our series takeaways. Mine has to do with Royce Lewis. I'm kind of closing the book on his Twins career. I think he could still have a successful career. He could still, be a solid major leaguer for multiple seasons to come, but I just don't see any way that happens in a Twins uniform.
That is very sad, but I think that's fair at this point. Mine is really simple. Just Byron Buxton stay healthy. Again, we'll see what they do tomorrow, but with him in the lineup, they're a better team. With him in the field, they're a better team. With him in the dugout, they're a better team. He is the most important player on the team. He's one of the best players in baseball. A team that's already not that good will not be good without him.
Yeah, and then Falvey Mattresses here, who could not join us tonight, but did give us a serious takeaway. He's a big Andrew Morris believer. That's no secret. He says, keep giving Andrew Morris leverage opportunities. They don't really have anything to do. And I think the Twins have kind of taken the same approach. We saw him get 2 more big outs today. Saturday, he didn't come through when they needed him to, but the results have been mixed, but you can see the idea of him. The stuff is some of the best in the bullpen. And really, like he said, there's nothing to lose. So keep giving him those opportunities. Like we talked about earlier, I'd much rather see a guy like him get 8th, 9th innings than a Luis Garcia or an Anthony Banda, while also realizing that the goal is to win the game. So they're in a little bit of a difficult spot, but I think we'll keep seeing him used in leverage opportunities. Now we'll take a quick break, and then we'll take a look at our minor league player of the week, and then what happened this week around the AL Central before previewing the upcoming Houston Astros series. Stick with us. And welcome back into Twins Takes as Twins Insider and I, Twins Central, continue to break down the Milwaukee Brewers series along with previewing the upcoming Houston Astros series. But for now, it's time for our minor league player of the week, an exciting one this week. First base / outfielder Hendry Mendez, who's now at St. Paul, called up just a few weeks ago. He was acquired in the Harrison Bader trade last year with the Philadelphia Phillies. He went 11 for 24 this week with a home run, 7 RBIs, walked 4 times, hit a double as well. That's a 1.161 OPS on the week, a 458 average. We talked last episode about long-term first base options and an oversight on our part. Neither of us mentioned Hendry Mendez. He's certainly a top 2 or 3 candidate, at least internally right now, for a long-term first baseman.
Yeah, if some of these outfielders are going to stay hurt and, Josh Bell continues to struggle, I almost wonder, I've kind of been thinking at some point if Mendez wouldn't get a call as far as he could play first 1 or 2 days a week, play DH, play outfield. Because he when he was acquired last year, he was already in Double-A. He was talked about as a guy who could debut this year. And now he's tearing the cover off the ball in Triple-A. For a team that's a little offensively challenged, I don't know how long they'll give him, but certainly looking like a really good trade to get him for potentially 6 years for an expiring corner outfielder in Harrison Bader.
Yeah, and the big hurdle with a lot of these prospects getting onto the roster is being on the 40-man roster. Hendry Mendez is already there, so if Josh Bell gets hurt, if Victor Caratini gets hurt, they'll have to call up a catcher. But if Josh Bell or Cody Clemens gets hurt, Mendez is probably the top guy to be called up. They'd have to clear a spot on the 40-man if they wanted to go with an Aaron Sabato type. So I think Mendez is probably ahead of him. He certainly has a higher ceiling as a prospect, as a major league player. So he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. He's a left-handed hitter. He can play in the outfield, but he's probably better suited for first base. He's pretty stocky build. Gabriel Gonzalez, another guy who could also play first base. They both have similar body types, one from the left side, one from the right side. But keep an eye on Mendez over the next few weeks. Watch him as he gets his first cup of coffee with the Saints. The early signs are certainly encouraging. Now it's time for a whip around the AL Central. The Cleveland Guardians still in first place. They are 26-22. They face Detroit for 4 games in the Motor City and then 3 at Philadelphia. Stephen Kwan has been moved out of the leadoff role. When the Twins were facing the Guardians last week, I was following along on Guardians Twitter a little bit. This was something they were all clamoring for, and then they finally pulled the plug on it this week. Kwan moved down to 6th in the lineup.
Yeah, and I noticed they scored a lot more runs. Yeah, because like you said, the Guardians fans were accurately pointing out that he was kind of holding them back by leading off with like his 500 OPS. But Guardians, as always, look solid. They don't look incredible, but they're always pesky. They look like they're going to win 85 to 90 games again. Another team that looks pesky that I think is less predictable is the White Sox. They're in second place. They're 24-22. They're one of only 4 teams above 500 in the American League. They have 3 at Seattle this week and 3 at the Giants. Nice little West Coast road trip, two of my favorite ballparks, favorite cities. A piece of news for them we talked about last week, Kyle Teal, the catcher, was on their catching prospect, young catcher, was on his rehab, but he hurt his knee rehabbing with the AAA team. So I don't know how serious that is, but certainly a blow for them.
Yeah, I was reading a quote from the AAA manager. It didn't sound like it was super serious, but it was going to push him back at least a few days. So we'll keep an eye on that, maybe have an update on Kyle Teal next week. I know you're a big fan of him. He's definitely a good player. Their other catcher, young catcher, Edgar Cuero, hit a walk-off in the Chicago series this afternoon. So both young, promising catchers for the White Sox, a team that we thought was going to be good this year and has not been good. The Detroit Tigers tied for last place in the AL Central with the Kansas City Royals at a record of 20-27. They have 4 with Cleveland, as we mentioned, and then they head to Baltimore for a 3-game set. They did get some reinforcements back this week. Casey Mize returned from the IL yesterday. He threw 6 shutout innings against the Blue Jays, so a little bit of help on the horizon for Detroit.
Yeah, certainly. When you're as injured as they are, eventually the injuries do stop and guys start to come back. But they've dug a little bit of a hole, and they lost another series to the Blue Jays this week. And again, when you dig a hole, you can dig out of it, but it makes everything more frantic. It makes it a little difficult. And again, a team in that same spot is those Royals with the same 20-27 record. They have homestand Boston and Seattle visit Kansas City this week. And again, they dug a hole. They kind of got out of it. They started to play respectable again, and now they've lost 8 of 11 again. So you Twins have had years like this too, where you're supposed to be pretty good, and when you dig these holes, it's hard to really get out of it and overcome it.
Yeah, so I have a question for you. So of these two teams that Detroit obviously was projected to win the division, and Kansas City's over-under was somewhere in the low 80s, so they were expected to be at least a respectable team. It's unlikely that both of them battle out of it, but if you had to pick one of these teams that you think will claw back into it, which one would you go with?
I don't, this is sort of on the spot, so I don't have everything in front of me, but I feel like the Royals just can't score. The Tigers lineup is still pretty decent. So I think just for that reason, I'd go Tigers. The Royals offense is Bobby Witt and Michael Garcia and 7 bad players.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Obviously, Detroit is dealing with some injuries as well. Kerry Carpenter's on the IL. Tarek Skubal is going to be out for a few months. I did see today he is expected to return before the trade deadline. That may be more about what the Detroit Tigers get back in return for Tarek Skubal rather than him getting back and making a playoff push. But that remains to be seen. Another team now that we expected to be at least decent and got off to a dreadful start. I believe the second worst record in the AL, the Houston Astros, who come to Target Field. No Carlos Correa, unfortunately. They're 19-29. The lineup has been good. 9th in runs scored, 6th in homers, 5th in WRC plus, but the pitching side of it just really, really bad. Last in ERA, last in FIP. They're 9th in K per 9, so it's not that they can't strike anybody out. They just allow way too many runs, and then their bullpen even worse than the Twins in win probability added at 28, the Twins in 27th. So the pitching staff just absolutely killing the Houston Astros amongst injuries, which I'll let you touch on here.
Well, my, oh my, a Carlos Correa-led team with injuries and underperforming pitching. What a shame. But I'm going to read, this might sound like I'm just reading their 26-man roster, but this is actually just the injured players. Starting pitcher Hunter Brown, shortstop Jeremy Pena, closer Josh Hader, shortstop / third base Carlos Correa, starting pitcher Hayden Wesneski, starting pitcher Ronel Blanco, starting pitcher Christian Javier, catcher Yainer Diaz, and then, as of today, second baseman Jose Altuve. All of those guys a lot of them are household names. That's almost an entire starting staff. It's one of the better closers of this generation. Pena, we should mention, is expected to be back tomorrow because, of course, he is.
Yeah, and anecdotally, I feel like Pena is a guy that usually has pretty good success for the Twins, so it's unfortunate that he can't miss, another 3 days. But yeah, like you said, that reads more like their 26-man roster than an injured list, especially for it only being mid-May. It's no surprise with all those starters on the IL that they're struggling so badly. And that wasn't even all the injuries. There was a few guys I left off there just because there's already so many. But but that's what Houston's dealing with. That's why they're 19-29 and have the worst pitching staff in all of baseball. Speaking of bad starters, Monday night, the opening game of the series, right-hander Tatsue Imai, he's 1-1, 9.24 ERA against Kendry Rojas, who we talked about earlier, making his first start in the major leagues. He's 1-0, 2.45 ERA. The whip is real high for Rojas, 2.18. So we'll see how that goes over what we expect to be a little bit longer outing, with Sim probably piggybacking him for a few innings. My question here for this one is, how many innings/outs do you think Shelton and the rest of the staff will ask SWR to get tomorrow?
Yeah, we kind of touched on this, but I feel like, again, it's more of a combination of him and Rojas. I think there will be some give and take of who's more effective. And I think the goal is that combined they do 5 innings, I think. So is that 3 for Rojas, 2 for Sim, 2 1/3, and 2 2/3? Like, I don't know. I would say somewhere between 2 and 3. We should, of course, mention they have all those injuries, but they do still have a guy named Yordan Alvarez, who, if you haven't heard of him, he can hit a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the plan is to let Rojas face Alvarez twice and then get Sim in there. I think it's probably unlikely they bring Sim in the middle of the inning, just because that's something he's never done. So maybe you take Rojas out in the middle of the inning and then bring in a guy like, a Yoendry Gomez or something to get through the rest of the inning before you turn the ball to Sim. But I'll be curious to see how they work that tomorrow. I'm sure we'll talk plenty about it on our next episode on Thursday. So that's something we'll all be keeping an eye on tomorrow. Then Tuesday, another 6:40 first pitch. Right-handed pitcher Lance McCullers gets the ball for Houston. He's 2-3, 6.86 ERA against Zebby Matthews, who only has that one start, went 7 scoreless innings. But while the results were good, we talked about it a little bit last episode, the velo was concerning for Matthews. How concerned are you about that for Zebby?
Well, like you mentioned last episode, I'm more concerned about it because of the lineup they're playing. The Marlins basically don't hit home runs, so the slower velo, and throwing strikes, it really was actually a great match. We saw it with Ober too. The Astros, Christian Walker, Paredes, Pena, Yordan. I could definitely see, even if he has a decent game, I could see several home runs given up on, 93-mile-an-hour hanging fastballs. Now, again, I want to make, until it actually doesn't work, I'll let him cook, but it's definitely a little concerning for me.
Yeah, and they did mention after his start, whatever day that was, Thursday, I think, they claim that it's intentional that he's throwing a little bit slower. I don't know that I believe that. I guess it could be true because the results with him throwing 98, 99 weren't particularly effective. Maybe he dialed some back. Usually you see that when guys, throw so hard they have no idea where the ball is going. That's not really the case with Zebby, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense to intentionally take some off of your stuff. I guess we'll see if he has success while throwing 95 instead of 98. I guess we'll say good job to the Twins and good job to the pitching staff. But we'll see. We'll break all that down next episode as well. I'm pretty concerned about this start for Zebby for all those reasons that you mentioned. Despite being 10 games below 500, the Houston lineup is still really, really good with, all those all-stars in there that you talked about. And then the series finale, I believe it's a 12-10 first pitch or maybe 12-40. Right-handed pitcher Mike Burrows gets the ball. He's 2-5, 5.72 ERA. This is a guy that fantasy people were really, really excited about headed into the year. He has not put it together yet for Houston. Joe Ryan gets the ball for the Twins. He's 2-3 despite a 3.20 ERA. My question on this one is more on the hitting side of things. Assuming Buck returns sometime this series, we've seen Austin Martin take the leadoff position, which we've all been clamoring for in the lineup. It makes a lot more sense to have him hitting leadoff with the OBP so high. Do you think they'll keep Austin Martin there now that he's been there for a few days, now that he's going to get this longer leash with the Wallner being off the roster, or will we see Buxton back hitting number 1 in the Twins lineup?
Well, like you mentioned, I've been clamoring for it. You've been clamoring for it. I know Martin had a good game today. He had a bad game yesterday. I think they like Buxton in the leadoff spot. I still maintain you want to have your 400 OBP guy in front of your 50 home run guy, but they just seem to like Buxton so much. I think he just starting the game off with your best hitter hitting right away. I think they like the mental kind of intimidation of it, even if it's probably not the right strategy move.
Yeah, I think you raise a fair point there. The other thing with Austin Martin that I'm questioning is why is he playing in right field? And then a guy with, I guess when it's been Outman, it's been fine because Outman has pretty good range as well. But when it's Larnach in left field, that's like completely ass backwards to how I would do it. Especially at target field, left field is very big and right field is much smaller because of the wall. It would make much more sense to play Martin in left, who has played plenty of left field in his career, especially with the Twins, and Larnach, who obviously is challenged range-wise. It would make much more sense to flip those two around.
Yes, it would. And you mentioned the range. You didn't even mention the arms. Martin has a pea shooter of an arm. Larnach has a decent arm. I believe they mentioned it at some point that it's just a comfort thing that like Larnach is they're like Larnach is more comfortable in left than Martin is uncomfortable in right. Basically, I mean again, I don't know if that's the right baseball move, but it seems to keep everybody happy, I guess.
Yeah, that is the reason that I've heard of on it as well. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems like you're intentionally making the team worse for a little bit of comfortability. And I'd say if Larnach's not capable of, playing right field, at least passably, why isn't he just DHing, especially when the guys that they're playing at DH right now have been so awful. But that's a conversation for another day, and they need to get some options to call up to take a spot in the field for those guys before that's a concern. But now it's time for our series predictions before we close this one out. I think the Astros will continue to struggle on the pitching side of things. I like the matchups the Twins have, despite not being, the top guys. No Taj Bradley, no Bailey Ober in this one. I still think the pitching matchups lean in the Twins' direction. I'll go 2-1 here.
Yeah, and Will echoes your 2-1. Like you said, I like these pitching matchups. We talked about it last game. Or last show, he's starting to kind of round into form. He's pitching really well. I think 2-1 is probably the safe bet because I think the Twins are actually the better team. This might just be kind of hope casting, but I am going to go 3-0. When they've done these bullpen games, which they're kind of going to do on Monday, I've actually liked it. They've managed, even with their bullpen's not very good, they managed to kind of cobble it together really well. And the Twins are actually better than this team. They need these wins. I'm going to go 3-0.
Yeah, and the Twins bullpen has been better here over the last few weeks, so they're starting to figure a little bit of that out. Even if there hasn't been one, standout reliever, they're getting results for the time being, which that's encouraging when tomorrow is going to be a pseudo bullpen game, even with Rojas and the SWR figuring into the plan somehow. Troy does project a 1-2. And a side note on Troy, he is graduating college this past weekend. That's why he hasn't been on the show as of late. So if you see Troy on Twitter, let him know congratulations, a big milestone for Troy. But that's all for this episode. For Twins Insider, I'm Twins Central. Thanks everybody for listening. Goodbye.